Hey everyone, this is Chelsea and welcome back to another Creative Design Team video. This month we are talking all about stamping on layouts and giving you some ideas for using your stamps on your scrapbook pages. Today I'll be creating a double page layout using this Moments with You Stampin' Thin Cut set, this Lake Rules background stamp, and the Isabella Scrapbooking Stampin' Thin Cut set. Love these very detailed florals. I'm also using the July-August mix-in papers. I'm showing you the pink one, but I do end up pulling in a couple more patterns from this pack. And then also some paper from the Isabella collection. I'm also going to use some Kraft Cardstock and a little bit of Vellum. The inspiration for these pages are some cute photos of my daughter's first time at the beach. It's first time dipping her toes in the lake, and I like the colors of her outfit, so that's what inspired the color palette. My first step is going to be to clear emboss my background with this Lake Rules stamp set. I'm not going to mount it on a block. I'm actually going to use it right on the carrier sheet and then just ink it up with Versamark. You will want to use an anti-static powder tool on your paper before you stamp. I didn't do it here, but I did end up using it after this just because the fibers of the craft paper really likes to hang on to that embossing powder. For large stamps like this, I find it really easy to use the stamp right on the carrier sheet because then you don't need to peel it on and off. And you can see how I pressed all over with my fingers, getting really good coverage on the stamped image. I'm using clear embossing powder here just because I want it to be a little bit more subtle and kind of a tone on tone with a nice glossy finish, but I didn't want to go as stark as using like a white powder. You can see how I'm holding my paper up so that the heat can easily go through the paper. One, this embosses a lot faster this way rather than laying it flat on your table, but also it keeps your Versamat from curling because Versamats do not like heat. Yes, I have learned the hard way and ended up with a warped mat. So if you are heat embossing over top of a Versamat, just make sure you lift your paper up and just hold it up in the air to heat set it. So you can see that nice glossy finish on the embossing. I went ahead and did the whole top of the page, just repeatedly stamping that background. And now I'm going to move on to my stenciling. So you're getting a little sneak peek. This stencil here is launching in September. But I loved this uneven sun ray design, and I wanted these rays to be coming out from behind my photos. I'm going to use 3 colors of Distress Oxide inks. I have Squeezed Lemonade, Tattered Rose, and Abandoned Coral. So I chose colors that I thought would go well with my photos and also the images that I'm going to color in a little bit. So you can see I'm just using the inking tool and applying the ink into the rays. I do go back and layer it up a bit, especially for the lighter colors, because as it dries, it does fade and darken a little bit. As I'm applying the ink, I'm purposefully not going right to the end of the rays. You can kind of see how I lighten up, kind of let the ink fade out. I didn't want to take it right to the end and have a very kind of abrupt end to the rays. I just wanted them to be kind of blended and disappear as you get towards the edge of the page. Now I could go back and wipe the ink off of all the embossing, but I didn't bother because I figured I wanted a softer look to it anyways, not so high contrast. So the places where the ink stuck on top of the embossing, I just left it and let it dry. I have rotated my stencil now, and I'm going in with Abandoned Coral over the areas that are brown within the rays and just slightly blending it into the yellow. I like to jump back and forth with an inking tool between the yellow and the coral just to help them blend together and so that there's no harsh line. So I'll just keep repeating this all the way around the stencil. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with the Tattered Rose ink once I rotate the stencil one more time. I love using these oxide inks for blending like this because they blend so well together and really smoothly. And also because they are part pigment ink, they sit on top of the craft paper and you actually get to see the color. Whereas if it was just dye ink, it would soak right into the paper and look a lot different. So here is our finished background, and I am getting some strips ready of varying widths to use on the bottom part of this page. And I'm just going to rip each one of them down one of the long sides. When you're ripping, if you rip towards yourself, you will see the white core of the paper. And if you rip away from yourself, you won't see that white core. You'll just see the ripped edge of the pattern paper. I like to hold my thumb in place beside where I'm ripping so that it keeps me from accidentally ripping deeper into the paper than I mean to, especially on these smaller strips. I don't want to get carried away. I decided to substitute this toffee polka dot paper from the mix-in pack for that strip of craft paper that I was going to use. It's a nice subtle pattern and it works as a really good substitute for the craft paper. Now I'm just going to start adhering all my strips, starting with the very bottom and then working my way up. I like the definition that the ripping gives to each of these layers. It really helps each paper stand out and it almost looks like little ruffles. When I'm adhering this vellum strip, I make sure to put the adhesive right at the top where it's going to be hidden by the other pattern paper. And this little strip here that I'm sticking on is also from the mix-in paper pack. It's the perfect blue that matches the denim in Isabella's outfit. For my photo mats here, I have some of the pink pattern paper from the mix-ins, as well as some white cardstock. And the white cardstock, I'm actually using my distressing tool to rough up the edges. If you don't have one of these, you could also use the blades of your scissors. Just make sure to go slow so you don't accidentally cut into your paper. Ripping and edge distressing are two techniques I used to use all the time. And it's funny, it's something that I kind of just stopped doing along the way. And I'm glad I brought it back out for this layout. I decided instead of distressing the edges of these pink mats that I was going to rip them instead. And I'm not ripping them all the way around. I'm just doing one short side and one long side. And then I'm going to tuck them in behind the photos, kind of offset so that the rip side is showing. I could have made these pink mats a little bit bigger to allow some room for ripping, but I hadn't planned that far ahead. So instead I just decided to let them stick out on one side of each photo, and I think it worked out okay. I went ahead and adhered those down into place and just kind of offset them a little bit, and now I'm adding my title. The I Love is cut from Kraft Cardstock using the die that comes in the Moments with You set, and there's a whole bunch of sentiments that you can choose from that coordinate with the die. So my full title will read, I love the sound of your laugh like sunshine to my soul, which I thought with the whole sunray background and the outdoor photos that fit perfectly. The stamped part of my title is done in black Archival ink, and then I'm just mounting the strip onto some more of that blue pattern paper just to help it pop and add a little bit more blue to the bottom of this page. I flagged both ends of the white strip, so then I needed to match that once I had adhered it onto the blue paper. I created a bunch of floral embellishments for these pages using the Isabella Scrapbooking Stamp and Thin Cut set. I colored them all up with pencils, and I did record that for you, but I'm going to put that at the end of the video, so that way if you're not interested in watching me color, you can just watch the assembly part. But if you want to see how I shaded these with pencils, just keep watching right until the end. So you can see the leaves and flowers that are getting tucked under are stuck down with glue, and then the ones that are on top I'm adhering with pop dots, just to add a little bit of variation in the clusters of florals. I love using stamped images as embellishments on my pages because unlike sticker sheets, you never run out and you can always make more and have exactly what you need. I'm grabbing some retired I Heart Us Sequins from my stash. I grabbed them because they're duochrome colors and they have like a beautiful shift to them. And they also match my project perfectly. It was not planned. I just kind of went to my drawer to find some sort of sparkly embellishment that would match my layout, and this was a happy surprise. I quite often like to add some kind of gem or sequin to my clusters just to add some shimmer to the page and also make those clusters a little bit more loose and whimsical. Now, unfortunately for this second page, I was not recording for the first part of putting this together, so I thought I'd push the button, and I didn't push the button, but basically I repeated all the same steps for the background, for all the strips along the bottom. That is the exact same as the first page. Only difference is I am using three 3x4 photos, and I didn't use pink mats this time. I only used the white cardstock, and I distressed the edges of it. Now I'm just fussing around with the arrangement here, trying to figure out how I want my photos, where I want the florals to be. I did end up pop dotting that center photo, so it is standing up a little bit above the other two. And then also for my florals, I'm doing the same thing where the ones that are tucked under are stuck down with glue and the ones that are over top are pop dotted. I did purposely use smaller photos on this page because I wanted more of that craft paper to show and all that beautiful stamping and inking that we did. I'd wanted to make sure I didn't cover all of it up with photos and embellishments. I'm adding more of those sequins around this page, just doing groups of 2s and 3s again to all the floral arrangements. Next, I'm going to add some white strips of cardstock for my journaling. I typically like to make these about 3/8 of an inch high and then however long I need. So I'm just plotting out where they're going to go. And then I decided to just handwrite my journaling, and I put a couple above and then the rest below. And then over on the left page, I just put the location and the date. In my journaling, I just told the story of how this was an impromptu stop at the lake, and we decided to take her out of her stroller while we were on a walk and let her splash around in the water. Really, she just wanted to sit down and have a play right away, but we just walked around and let her get her feet wet. I love how these pages turned out with that nice shiny embossing in the background. It's definitely there, but it doesn't steal the show. All the soft inks and the coloring and all the layers. There's a lot of texture on these pages. So now if you want to see how I colored up all these florals, stick around, that is next. All the florals I used on these layouts are stamped from the Isabella Scrapbooking Stamp and Thin Cuts. And then I used this Prismacolor pencil in dark green, and then these Advantage Watercolour pencils. I'm not using water with them, I'm just using them dry. They're actually no longer carried by close to my heart, but I really enjoy them, so I keep using them. And my images were stamped on white cardstock with Archival black ink. And I did heat set the ink because sometimes that one stays wet a little bit longer, so I heat set to make sure it wasn't going to smear. I like to start with my darker shade first, so I'm following the lines on the image to show me where the dark should go, and then I will add the lighter yellow in the remaining space and kind of blend them together. The lead in these watercolor pencils is very firm, so if you add strokes down, those lines are going to stay, which is exactly what I wanted and why I used these pencils. When you add the veining on the flowers or the shading on the lemon, it adds some nice kind of hand-drawn look to it. It adds some more texture than using really soft pencils that just blend right out. So you can see on the flower here, I added the darker pink first and then went back and started blending over that very lightly with the light pink. I want it to almost fade out to a white, so I want the very tips to be very light. I'm keeping the majority of the color lower down on the petals. And I'm adding the dark pink sparingly to the tops of some of the petals, just following the lines of the image. So it adds a little bit of definition and contrast. So I'm just going to play a little bit of music and let you watch me shade all of these petals, just so you can get a really good feeling for how this goes. And then I will talk you through how I'm coloring my leaves, because it is a little bit different with a different kind of pencil. For all of the leaves, I am using a dark green Prismacolor pencil, just because this was the exact shade of green that I wanted, and I didn't have that in the watercolor pencils. Now, Prismacolors have very soft lead, and they blend very nicely, but it is very easy to add a lot of pigment. So in order to get a light shade of this color, I am barely touching the paper, like the lightest hand possible. And then I'm using slightly more pressure to get a darker shade of the same color. For adding the shadows, I decided to make the area under the berries darker, because I figured they would be shaded there. And then the center vein on all my leaves, I made darker, and as well as some of the tips of the leaves. So I just kind of followed the lines and colored in the direction of the lines on the leaves. You don't want to color across the lines, because otherwise it won't look right. Here's a close-up look at the flowers and leaves that I colored for that left-hand page. Hopefully you can see all the details from the shading, and here's some of the single leaves. You can kind of see how I made that center vein darker. And I hope this coloring demo helped you. On this layout, I use stamps for the background, the embellishments, and the title. And I hope it gives you some inspiration for how you can use stamps on your pages. If you are ready for more stamping inspiration, make sure you check out all the other creative design team videos. I will have everyone linked down in the description box, and come back tomorrow for Julie's video because I know she has a beautiful project for you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.